It had been raining for 3 days straight in Chestnut Hollow, that tiny town that still clung to its cobblestone streets and chattering front porches. And somewhere on the edge of the town's oldest lane, Ivy Clarke stood outside her family's ancestral home, gripping the iron gate so tightly her knuckles turned white. The house had been her grandmother's pride. Ivy had grown up running barefoot across its creaky floors, making jam with her in the warm, sticky summers, and reading letters from her grandfather during winter storms by the crackling fire. It should have been hers. Everyone had said so, until the will was read. Everything to Clarissa, the lawyer had said in a voice too clipped, too efficient. His hand trembled slightly when Ivy stared at him in disbelief, but he kept reading. All properties, assets, personal effects, and financial accounts. Clarissa Clarke, Ivy's cousin, the perfect one, the one who only visited when it was convenient, who had skipped every holiday gathering for the last 5 years, who barely remembered the color of Nana's favorite tea kettle. And Ivy? She had been there. She had been there through every late-night call, every hospital trip, every moment Nana forgot where she was and cried like a child. She must have changed it recently, Clarissa had said afterward, smiling with a plastic kindness that didn't reach her eyes. I guess Nana knew who really deserved it. Ivy hadn't said a word then. She couldn't. Her throat had closed up so tightly it hurt to breathe. She spent the next week spiraling between anger and grief, thinking maybe she had imagined all the promises Nana used to whisper in the quiet hours. This will be yours someday, darling. You'll keep the soul of this place alive. But the soul of the place was dying now, behind locked doors. The windows were shuttered. The roses Ivy had once tended were overgrown and curling brown at the edges. Clarissa had already listed the house online, flipping it like some cheap investment, staging it with soulless white furniture for glossy photos that made Ivy sick to her stomach. That night, as the rain battered her windshield, Ivy almost drove away, almost let it all go. But something, maybe it was the ghost of Nana's voice, maybe it was her own stubborn blood, made her climb the fence instead. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with forgotten memories. Ivy moved silently through the halls, her fingers brushing the worn wallpaper, the familiar squeak of the stairs beneath her steps. Clarissa hadn't emptied everything yet. The photos still hung in the hallway. The smell of cinnamon and mothballs clung to the rooms. In Nana's bedroom, tucked beneath the mattress where only Ivy would think to look, she found it, a faded, folded letter with her name scrawled in shaky handwriting. My Ivy, if you are reading this, it means I couldn't make sure you got what I wanted for you. I tried. I don't know how or why things went wrong, but I trust you to find the key I left for you. It's yours by right, no matter what the papers say. Love always, Nana. A key. Heart-pounding, Ivy scanned the room, tearing through drawers, pulling back rugs. Nothing. Until she noticed the old paperweight on the bedside table, the one shaped like a sleeping cat, Nana's favorite. It had a crack along its side Ivy had never noticed before. With trembling hands, she pried it open. Inside was a tiny, rusted brass key, and taped to the key, a slip of paper. The garden shed. Under the heartstone. Ivy barely noticed the cold rain soaking through her clothes as she ran outside. Past the skeletal rose bushes, behind the crumbling garden wall, was the old shed she hadn't stepped into for years. The heartstone was easy to spot, a large, flat rock shaped like a lopsided heart that she and Nana used to sit on when the afternoons were long and golden. She pulled it aside with a grunt, her fingers scraping on the wet stone, and there, buried in the soft, black earth, was a small, iron strongbox. Her hands shook as she unlocked it. Inside was everything. Instead, she found treasure. Not gold or diamonds, not the kind of treasure that could fit into a bank vault. No, this was something deeper. Letters tied together with blue silk ribbon, faded photographs, a velvet pouch that jangled softly when she shook it, revealing a handful of antique rings and lockets, heirlooms that had disappeared years ago without explanation. At the bottom lay a stack of documents, wrapped in plastic to shield them from time and weather. Ivy pulled them free, her heart pounding harder with each page she skimmed. Property deeds, bank account details, stocks, all held in trusts under her grandmother's name, and all willed, signed, and dated to Ivy. Tears blurred her vision. Nana hadn't forgotten her. She hadn't betrayed her. She had tried to protect her, just not through the official channels that Clarissa had corrupted. She knew, Ivy whispered aloud, voice trembling. She knew they'd try to take it from me. A new kind of fire lit inside her, one hotter and sharper than grief. Ivy shoved the documents into her jacket and cradled the strongbox to her chest, racing back to her car before her cousin could realize she'd even been there. As she peeled out of the driveway, headlights sliced through the rain behind her. Clarissa. Ivy caught a flash of her smug, flawless face in the rearview mirror, lit up by the gleam of her luxury SUV. For a moment, Ivy panicked. But Clarissa didn't stop. She simply pulled into the driveway like she already owned the world. Maybe she thought she did. Maybe she had for too long. But not for much longer. The next morning, Ivy sat in the cramped office of a lawyer recommended by Mrs. Harmon, their old neighbor, the one person Ivy trusted more than anyone after Nana. Mr. Ellis was an old man with a sharp mind and a sharper sense of fairness. His lined face barely moved as he read through the papers Ivy spread out across his desk. When he finally looked up, something flared in his eyes. Approval. Maybe even admiration. "Your grandmother," he said slowly, tapping the strongest document, a handwritten, notarized letter from 3 years ago, leaving the original inheritance to Ivy alone, was very, very clever. "But what about the will Clarissa presented?" Ivy asked, nerves coiling tight in her belly. He gave a small smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "If this documentation is authentic, and judging by these notarized dates, signatures, and witnesses it is, then Clarissa's claim falls apart, especially if there's evidence she influenced or manipulated your grandmother in her final months." Ivy blinked. "Evidence?" Mr. Ellis nodded grimly. "Undue influence. It's ugly, but it's real, and it's illegal." Ivy leaned back in her chair, the first embers of hope crackling to life. "And Ivy..." Mr. Ellis leaned forward. "This isn't just about the house. It's about every account tied to your grandmother's estate, including the ones Clarissa has been trying to liquidate." The weight of it hit Ivy like a tidal wave. Clarissa hadn't just stolen a house. She had tried to steal an entire legacy. And thanks to Nana's secret plan and Ivy's persistence, she was about to lose everything. Later that day, Ivy pulled into a quiet parking lot behind the Chestnut Hollow Bank. She had barely stepped onto the sidewalk when her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. Clarissa. Ivy let it ring. Her cousin had called twice already and texted even more, all sickly sweet messages pretending to be concerned about Ivy's feelings or offering help if she needed to accept things and move on. Ivy almost laughed at the gall of it. Instead, she ignored the buzzing and walked inside, her paperwork tucked neatly under her arm. The manager, a balding man named Mr. Carter, met her with a firm handshake. His polite smile froze when Ivy laid down the deeds, the account numbers, the notarized statements. I wasn't aware there was another will," he stammered. "There was," Ivy said calmly. "And as of today, I'm moving everything into my name." For a moment, she thought he might argue, but the law was on her side now. Nana had made sure of it. By the time Ivy stepped back out into the cool afternoon air, the accounts were frozen under investigation, pending legal confirmation. Clarissa couldn't touch a dime. Not the house, not the money, not the memories. Ivy felt lighter than she had in months, but she wasn't finished yet. Not even close. Clarissa thought she could rewrite history with a fake smile and forged signatures. She thought Ivy would roll over and let her rob the life she had built with Nana, the life they had shared. Ivy stared down at her phone, still vibrating insistently. She pressed answer. "Clarissa," she said, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "I think we need to talk." Clarissa's voice oozed through the phone, syrupy and false. Ivy, thank goodness you answered. I've been so worried about you. This whole situation must be overwhelming. Overwhelming? Ivy could almost taste the bile in her throat. She kept her voice steady. I'm fine. We need to meet. In person. There was a pause, hesitation, calculation. Ivy could almost hear Clarissa's mind working, trying to decide if it was safer to keep her at arm's length. Finally, of course. I'd love that. Families should stick together, right? Ivy gave a humorless smile. Right. I'll see you at Nana's house. Tonight. Before Clarissa could protest or suggest some glossy cafe where she could control the setting, Ivy hung up. No more games, no more lies. It was time to bring everything into the light. Twilight draped Chestnut Hollow in bruised purple and gold as Ivy pulled into the driveway. The old house loomed like a monument behind the overgrown garden, shadows spilling from its eaves. Clarissa was already there, perched on the front steps in a white cashmere sweater, designer boots planted neatly on the wet stone, scrolling on her phone with a bored flick of her manicured thumb. She looked up when Ivy approached, flashing a smile that didn't reach her cold blue eyes. Ivy, she said, rising smoothly to her feet, arms outstretched as if they were meeting for a friendly chat, and not a confrontation that would shatter her carefully built empire. I'm so glad. Cut the act, Ivy said sharply. The words hit harder than she expected. Clarissa's smile faltered. Just a flicker, but it was enough. Ivy drew herself taller, pulling the envelope from her coat pocket, the one containing the photocopies of every document, every piece of proof that Clarissa's scheme was crumbling. You stole from me, Ivy said, voice steady and cold. You manipulated a dying woman and tried to erase me from her life, but Nana was smarter than you. Clarissa's eyes narrowed, her body going rigid. You have no idea what you're talking about, she hissed, her polished mask slipping for the first time. Nana changed her mind. She wanted me to... Save it, Ivy snapped, throwing the envelope at her feet. This is going to the court, to the bank, to the town council if I have to. You're finished, Clarissa. For a moment there was only the sound of the wind curling around them, rattling the dead leaves in the gutter. Then Clarissa's face twisted, not into the tearful regret Ivy had foolishly hoped for once, long ago, but into raw, snarling rage. You think you're better than me, she spat, stepping closer, jabbing a manicured finger at Ivy's chest. You think just because you were Nana's little pet you deserved everything? You're nothing. You're nobody. Ivy didn't flinch. Nana didn't think so, she said quietly. And now, neither will anyone else. Clarissa opened her mouth, but whatever venom she had ready died when headlights flooded the driveway. Mr. Ellis's car, and behind him, a second car with 2 uniformed officers stepping out into the night. Clarissa stumbled back. You called the cops? Her voice cracked, thin and shrill. No, Ivy said softly, almost pityingly. The bank did. One of the officers stepped forward, a clipboard in hand. Clarissa Clarke? We have some questions regarding allegations of financial fraud and estate manipulation. Clarissa's mouth opened and closed, wordless. As the officers began reading her rights, Ivy stepped back, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. She wasn't naive. This wasn't over yet. Clarissa would fight, drag this into court if she could. There would be ugly moments ahead. But for the first time in a long time, Ivy felt the ground solid under her feet. Nana had trusted her, and Ivy wasn't going to let her down. Later, after the squad car pulled away with Clarissa sullen and silent in the back seat, Ivy sat alone on the front porch. The rain had stopped, and a thick mist curled over the lawn, swallowing the garden in ghostly tendrils. From her coat pocket she pulled the old brass key again, the one Nana had hidden so carefully. Her thumb rubbed over its worn grooves, and a soft smile tugged at her lips. This was just the beginning. The house wasn't just wood and stone, it was laughter, heartbreak, stories whispered under quilts, recipes written in faded ink, and the sturdy, stubborn love of generations. And now, it was hers to protect. The strongbox sat beside her, its lid open to the night. Inside, among the deeds and treasures, Ivy spotted something she hadn't noticed before. A second envelope, smaller, tucked beneath a photograph of her as a little girl sitting on Nana's lap. She pulled it out carefully. Her grandmother's handwriting danced across the front. "For when you're ready." Ivy's heart stuttered. She hesitated, then slid her finger under the seal. Inside was a single piece of thick, cream-colored paper, and written in trembling script was a simple line. "There's more than you know. Trust your roots. Find the ledger." The ledger? Ivy's pulse quickened. She rose to her feet, the night humming around her like a living thing. Whatever Nana had hidden, whatever secrets were buried deeper, this was only the beginning. The night felt alive as Ivy walked the halls of the old house, the thin letter clutched tight in her hand. Find the ledger. Her mind raced with possibilities. She thought she knew every secret nook in this house, but Nana had clearly been playing a deeper game than anyone realized. Maybe she hadn't trusted even Ivy completely, not while Clarissa had been lurking in the shadows, charming visitors and sniffing out weaknesses. Ivy moved carefully, her shoes silent on the warped wooden floors. She checked the obvious places first: Nana's old writing desk, the bottom of the china cabinet where she kept birthday cards and tucked away treasures. But nothing. Finally, she returned to the heart of the home, the kitchen. It still smelled faintly of cinnamon and cloves, as if the very walls remembered Nana's endless baking experiments. Ivy leaned against the worn counter, frustrated, and tapped her fingers idly on the old butcher block island in the center of the room. Tap, tap, hollow. Ivy froze. Slowly, she moved around the island, running her hands along its sides. Toward the back, near where Nana used to keep her baking spices, her fingers caught on a tiny seam she had never noticed before. A hidden drawer. With a tug, it slid open, protesting with a groan of long-forgotten hinges. Inside, wrapped in oilskin and tied with a faded ribbon, was a thick, leather-bound book. The ledger. Ivy pulled it free with reverence, brushing dust from its cover. Her breath caught in her throat as she opened it. It wasn't just a financial ledger. It was a map, a tangled, meticulous record of the Clarke family's assets, properties, investments, and debts. Decades' worth of secrets. The first few pages were neat, orderly, but as Ivy flipped further, her stomach twisted. Names she didn't recognize. Land deals that didn't match the family's public story. Bank accounts hidden offshore. Silent partnerships in businesses across the country, some thriving, some long dead. And sprinkled throughout, a pattern emerged. Transactions Clarissa's father, Uncle Martin, had made years ago, skimming from Nana's estate, laundering money through shell companies, hiding assets. And Clarissa, Ivy's heart pounded faster, had been quietly continuing it after his death. Ivy slammed the ledger shut, her hands shaking. This wasn't just about stealing the house. This was about fraud on a massive scale, enough to ruin reputations, enough to destroy Clarissa's future forever. No wonder Nana had hidden it so carefully. She had known. She had protected Ivy, not just from financial loss, but from becoming a target. A chill rolled down Ivy's spine. Clarissa hadn't been acting alone. There had to be others. Lawyers, maybe. Bank managers. Family friends who had looked the other way. The depth of it all made Ivy dizzy. She thought she had already won. She thought it was over when Clarissa was dragged off in handcuffs. But this? This was a war just beginning. The next morning, Ivy sat at the tiny kitchen table, the ledger open before her, surrounded by stacks of notes and photocopies. She hadn't slept. She barely noticed the hours ticking by, fueled only by adrenaline and a bottomless pot of black coffee. The house groaned around her, settling with the shift of the seasons. She knew she couldn't go public yet, not without gathering everything, not without understanding the full scale of what Nana had left behind. Nana hadn't been just sentimental. She had been strategic, methodical. Every note, every transfer, every coded entry in the margins of the ledger hinted at more. At the very back of the book, tucked into a pocket sewn into the leather cover, Ivy found a key. A different key. This one was modern, silver, clean, stamped with a number, B17. No hint, no address, just the cold, gleaming shape of another mystery. Ivy rubbed her thumb over the number, feeling her heartbeat thunder in her ears. Trust your roots, the letter had said. Chestnut Hollow's bank had private lockboxes. So did the old train station. It had been converted into an archival storage unit years ago. And then there was the old Clarke storage facility on Maple Street. Family-owned, barely maintained, cheap and anonymous. Ivy's gut twisted. The Clarke storage facility. She grabbed her bag, shoved the ledger and key inside, and drove toward Maple Street, the morning fog thick and low like a living thing creeping across the ground. The storage facility was as sad as she remembered. A squat, gray building with peeling paint and a sagging fence. A single bored clerk sat behind a scratched plexiglass window, scrolling through his phone. Unit B17? Ivy asked, trying to keep her voice casual. The man barely glanced up. ID? She handed it over with a shaking hand. After a long, suspicious pause, he handed it back and gestured down a grimy hallway. Second left. Bring your own light. Perfect. Ivy stepped carefully over a puddle of God knows what and found the unit. The key slid into the lock easily. With a deep breath, she turned it. The door creaked open to reveal boxes, stacks and stacks of boxes, neatly labeled in Nana's spidery handwriting. And in the center, resting atop a battered trunk, was a sealed manila envelope, marked simply, "If anything happens to me, give this to Ivy Clarke." Ivy's throat closed up. She stepped inside, the heavy air swallowing her whole. Behind her, the door swung shut with a final, echoing thud. The heavy air inside the storage unit felt thick enough to choke on. Ivy took one tentative step forward, the ancient concrete floor creaking slightly beneath her boots. Her breath puffed out in thin clouds. It was colder here, almost unnaturally so, as if time itself had stalled between these narrow walls. She moved to the battered trunk first, running her fingers over its splintered wood. It looked ancient, battered by years of weather and handling. She flipped open the rusty latch. Inside, she found piles of documents, yellowed property titles, old photographs, contracts, letters, names she didn't recognize mixed with names she did. Her great-grandfather, her uncles, her own father, all intertwined with the long, complicated history of the Clarke family's quiet empire. Ivy's mind reeled as she sifted through it all. It wasn't just about Nana or Clarissa. It was the whole lineage, built on secrets, questionable dealings, and betrayals whispered through generations. And somehow, Ivy realized, Nana had spent her final years trying to clean it all up, to make sure Ivy wouldn't be left to inherit a rotting foundation. The manila envelope lay there, silent and heavy with promise. Ivy picked it up carefully. The weight of it was wrong, thicker, heavier than mere papers. With trembling hands, she tore it open. A bundle of documents spilled out. Notarized statements from Nana detailing Clarissa's coercion, witness statements from nurses and neighbors, secret accounts opened in Ivy's name to protect the remaining assets. But tucked among the legal paperwork was something else. A flash drive, and a note, in Nana's painstaking hand. If you're reading this, Ivy, it means the fight has begun. You will need allies. Trust no one unless you find the key words hidden in the ledger. Use the drive. It holds everything they fear. Ivy's heart thundered. Nana had seen everything coming. The betrayal, the greed, the desperation. She hadn't just protected Ivy's inheritance. She had gathered evidence. Weapons. Ivy clutched the flash drive tightly. She didn't even know yet what it contained, but she felt its power humming in her palm. Enough to ruin reputations. Enough to expose the web of lies that had stretched over Chestnut Hollow like a second skin. She drove straight to Mrs. Harmon's house, the one person she still trusted. The older woman answered the door in a thick sweater and slippers, her gray hair tied back in a loose knot. One look at Ivy's face, and she stepped aside without a word. They sat at the worn kitchen table, lit only by the flickering light above the stove. Ivy pulled out her laptop, plugging in the flash drive with a hand that wouldn't stop trembling. Files exploded onto the screen: audio recordings, scanned letters, photographs, wire transfer histories. Names Ivy had seen before: Clarissa, Uncle Martin, but also others. Bankers, lawyers, family friends who had quietly profited from Nana's fading trust. One folder was labeled, "The Final Play." Ivy clicked it open. Inside was a video. Her breath caught when the first frame appeared. Nana, sitting at her kitchen table, looking frailer than Ivy remembered, but with eyes that still burned bright with fierce intelligence. She pressed play. "My darling Ivy," Nana said, her voice trembling but strong. "If you are seeing this, it means I'm gone, and you are standing at the door of a war I tried to keep you from. You have always been my heart, my hope. I have left you the truth they tried so hard to bury. You must decide how to use it, but know this: whatever they offer you to stay silent, it will never be enough." Nana leaned closer to the camera, her weathered hands clutching a photo, the family photo Ivy knew well, and tapped on Clarissa's face. "She will lie, she will cry, she will beg. Don't believe her." Tears blurred Ivy's vision. Mrs. Harmon reached across the table, squeezing her hand silently. There was no question anymore. Nana hadn't just wanted Ivy to survive. She had wanted her to finish what she started. The next morning, Ivy filed the official petitions with the town court, not just to contest the fraudulent will, but to open a full public investigation into Clarissa, Uncle Martin's dealings, and the entire corrupt network Nana had uncovered. News spread through Chestnut Hollow like wildfire. Neighbors, who had once looked at Ivy with pity, now watched her with wide, uncertain eyes. Rumors swirled, ugly and fast. Clarissa's frozen assets, the suspicious transfers, the possible charges looming. Clarissa tried to call, of course, left pleading voicemails, threatened lawsuits, even promised Ivy a fair share if she backed off. Ivy deleted every message without listening to the end. The old Ivy, the one who flinched and apologized and backed down, was gone. This new Ivy stood taller each day, fueled by a deeper purpose, not just to claim what was hers, but to tear down the rotted foundations and rebuild something that could finally stand in the light. But just as she thought she could see the end of the battle, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed with cold, mechanical precision. "You're digging too deep. Stop now, or you won't like what you find." No signature, no clue, just a warning. Ivy stared at it, her heart pounding. Who else was involved? How far did this web of secrets stretch? And more urgently, what had Nana hidden even deeper? Because one thing was clear: this wasn't over. It had only just begun. The unsigned letter sat on Ivy's kitchen counter for 2 whole days, haunting every step she took. "You're digging too deep. Stop now, or you won't like what you find." She studied it again and again. The sterile font, the cheap printer ink, the way it reeked of fear disguised as threat. Clarissa? One of the crooked lawyers? Someone else tied to the old Clarke scandals? No matter who had sent it, Ivy knew one thing: she wasn't stopping. Not now. Not when Nana had sacrificed everything to give her this chance. The court date arrived faster than Ivy expected. Chestnut Hollow's old courthouse stood stubborn and ancient at the end of Main Street, draped in ivy vines like the building itself was bracing for battle. Inside, Ivy sat rigidly at the polished oak table, Mr. Ellis by her side, the strongbox, the ledger, and the flash drive's evidence stacked in front of her like a fortress. Across the aisle, Clarissa looked thinner, paler, her once glossy hair pulled into a severe bun, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. When she caught Ivy's gaze, she flinched. Good. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Harrow, wasted no time. The evidence Ivy and Mr. Ellis presented was overwhelming. The hidden trust documents, the real will. The secret recordings, the fraudulent bank transfers linked to Clarissa and her father. The ledger tracing decades of hidden corruption. Clarissa's high-powered attorney, the best money could buy, tried every trick in the book. Character assassination, questioning Ivy's mental stability, even suggesting Ivy had fabricated the evidence herself. But the paper trail was airtight, the voice recordings irrefutable, the signatures damning. And then came the final blow. Mr. Ellis introduced the video of Nana speaking to Ivy beyond the grave. The courtroom fell into a stunned, reverent silence as Nana's frail but determined voice filled the air, telling the truth, naming names, exposing the rot Clarissa had tried to bury. Clarissa sobbed once during the video, but no one believed her tears anymore, not even the judge. The ruling came swift and brutal. Clarissa's forged will was declared invalid. The rightful inheritance, the house, the accounts, everything, was restored to Ivy. Clarissa was referred for criminal prosecution on charges of fraud, elder abuse, and financial coercion. As she was led out of the courtroom, Clarissa didn't scream, didn't plead. She just looked back once, her eyes full of a hatred so pure and helpless it almost seemed to collapse her from within. Ivy met her gaze steadily, not with hatred, with freedom, because this battle wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about reclaiming her life. Weeks later, the house on Chestnut Hollow Lane began to breathe again. Ivy threw open the windows, letting the golden autumn air flood the rooms. She tore down the sterile staging furniture Clarissa had brought in. She painted the walls herself, even though she'd never held a brush before. She replanted the roses, Nana's favorites, with her own bare hands, sinking her fingers into the soil until she felt rooted too. Neighbors who once whispered now waved and stopped by with pies and nervous smiles. They had seen the truth, and they were trying to find their way back to it, just like Ivy was. One afternoon, Ivy sat on the front porch, the sun sinking low in the sky, and opened the ledger one last time. Tucked at the very back, between the last pages, she found something she hadn't noticed before. A tiny photo of herself as a little girl, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, her arms wrapped tight around Nana's waist. On the back, in Nana's careful script, it read, "Roots run deep, so does love. Protect what matters, Ivy girl. It's yours now." Tears blurred Ivy's vision. She didn't fight them this time. She let them fall. For the lost years the battles fought, the woman who had loved her enough to trust her with a legacy built not on money, but on truth. Ivy smiled through the tears, clutching the photo to her chest. The past was messy, but the future was hers to build. And for the first time in her life, she was finally beautifully free.